So right now, let's jump right into the property and show everybody your guest investor chops. We're going to magically whisk ourselves away here to 8047 Hammond Boulevard in Jacksonville, Florida, 32220. It is a new construction property. As you can tell here, this is a representation of the floor plan, but the characteristically sunny Jacksonville sky. Purchase price of $235,000. 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom, and what our investors tend to come here for, right? The estimated conventional ROI when financed of 12.08%. Dean, when you are, you've gone through this show, not the show, you've gone through this like examining of a JWB property 7 times now. What's the first place that your eye goes to?
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say the purchase price, but quite honestly, I look at it because that's the thing that's bolded the most. However, you have to look at the IRR. I mean, that's overall, especially the way the stock market, inflation, all that kind of stuff's happening right now. It is what it is. And, I look at the 2-car garage, which I think is a huge rental opportunity there. I do see this is on septic. And I do remember a show that I listened to long time ago, must have been a podcast, about a really cool program that JWB has for people that are on septic programs. Because I've always strayed away from septic in the past just because I had always heard horror stories about issues you can have with septic systems. But now that you have a program that allows for that to be mitigated, that fear to be mitigated, I think that I would have no problem looking at a property like this in the future.
Interesting. I love that, man. Normally I have GC here, and normally I ask him, what does he love about this property? And GC, being the very prepared person that he normally is, he sent it in ahead of time. So he puts here that it is brand new construction, which means lower maintenance and vacancy costs. And in order to take advantage of lower interest rates right now, putting a property under contract that is already built or renovated, that's a problem for most investors who are stuck on waiting lists, of pre-construction, is not a problem with JWB. You can put this thing under contract and immediately lock it in at these rates that we know are showing us that they are going up, right? So that's actually something that became really real to me at this conference that I went to this week in Cleveland for holdcos, right? Like guys that invest in other companies. I was asking them about real estate, and some of them were real estate investors, but they were having a real hard time, finding properties to invest in, right? So like this idea that JWB's never had a waiting list. For the first time, I started getting data points outside of our community about that. Have you, Dean, you've invested with other companies, right? Like, did you ever encounter a waiting list scenario? Was that kind of what brought you here, or how did you end up? I guess I'm about to ask you 10 questions, but have you ever encountered the waiting list scenario?
We did, and it was with a different turnkey company, which then allowed us to start looking at other options. I reached back out when I started in 2013. It was my money. It was my wife's and I money that we were using to invest. And then I think a lot of us are all of the not your average investors came through the Fortune Builder program, as did we, and heard about JWB, but didn't know anything about it. So started doing my own research, listening to these podcasts, seeing how relatable people were, talking with the onboarding team. And yeah, the fact that there was no waiting list and the mortgage rates were so great at that time, yeah, that definitely brought us over. Now, the other company is great. One of the things that really turned myself on and my wife on to the idea of turnkey investing, because, I've never been to Memphis, Tennessee, but I've got houses there. And people are like, how can you invest in a place you've never even been to? But it's that mind shift that you have to get through to understand that. But this other company said this, and it really got my attention, is that they said that if my wife and I have to spend more than 4 hours a year doing stuff related to these properties, then they are doing something wrong. And that really stuck with me. I mean, obviously there's a lot of time when you get set up and you got to go through the whole process of buying the property, the asset, and that type of thing. But, after that, the very first property we bought, you're quoted on what the annual lease is going to be, the amount. How dare JWB, the very first property we had, they got a 3-year lease and they got it for $200 more per month than they said they were going to do. Gosh darn it. Right?
Yeah.
And I don't have to worry about it now. They just do what they do, which is fantastic. So
That's pretty awesome, man. The other big misconception, Dean, that I keep hearing from people is, not just I can't be a real estate owner without plunging a toilet, but people are just like, well, I look at the cash flow, and then at the end of the year, like, I'm thinking about it and I think of the things that I've done and is it really making money? And I find that people don't really understand the 5 profit centers. Can you give a shot at kind of when you think about this like 12% IRR, how do you think about the profit centers that come out of this thing?
well, on the 12% IRR, I mean, the biggest thing is that these properties are going to have people living in them that have been vetted by JWB and met all of their standards for the type of tenant that they want. So I understand, and Pablo, we talked, you may have an eviction coming up, and that's going to happen. I mean, nobody's perfect, and you don't know what the situation is related to that. But on average, they're going to have a really, really good tenant that is going to be paying for all of this stuff. So it's not just the mortgage that you're paying down. It's they're covering the cost of the insurance. They're helping you make a property that's depreciating. There's tax benefits. There's all of these things that are built into this thing. And besides the initial investment, I don't have to worry about. And they're also building up equity in the amount of product of the asset that I own, so that in my earlier example, by doing a cash out refi on a non-recourse property in Texas, allowed us to buy two new new builds with JWB. First new builds we ever had were with JWB.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So,
yeah, I've been going on podcasts recently and talking about it, man, but it's like, it's fascinating. People don't understand that it's like cash flow is one of the 5 things, right? To what you're talking about, right? Like if you are cash flowing positively on a month-to-month basis, that allows for the other 4 to kick in without, and you have somebody doing it for you, then these other 4 things kick in without added stress. You mentioned debt pay down, right? The idea that your resident is paying down a loan. So, worst comes to worst, you're still gaining that equity, which eventually turns, well, I guess I don't have to get there yet. There's also tax savings and the idea that you can depreciate the cost of the actual physical house, not the land, over 30 years. And that causes this like non-cash tax deduction that is able to save you some money on taxes, which is another profit center. There's the idea of inflation hedging, which is becoming a more and more of a bigger thing as the consumer price index hits like 9 and 10 and all these different things, and gas is going crazy. And then there's appreciation, which, as Gregg likes to explain, is the idea that, in the short term, you don't want to be banking on appreciation because you have all these other things with closing costs and whatnot. But if you're in it for a full market cycle, which we estimate to be 10 to 20 years, then you can count on the historical appreciation rate of a home kicking in over that time period. And Jacksonville, out of all these like cash flowing markets that, satisfy condition number 1, happens to have way more of a higher appreciation rate over the last, historical appreciation rate. So it is a great place to buy and hold. And then what Dean is talking about is this idea that because he's been in it for some time, that combination of debt pay down and appreciation in other assets, that equity that he gains in the house, he's able to take that out and then go buy other rental properties, which is what I'm hoping to get to here in a couple of years as well, because I'm in the beginning of my journey. Is that pretty good synthesis there?
that's great. And you nailed it. And the other thing that when they put out this property information through your account rep, they base it. One thing that I really, really appreciate is the under promise and over deliver. Because right now, Jacksonville, what does Gregg say? We're at a 22 to 23% appreciation, in a year. It ain't always going to be that way. Excuse my French. But if you look at this thing here, the appreciation rate is calculated at 4.6, which is anything else. If one company has a shortfall and we can't use that money anywhere else. So you obviously have to have a cushion, which we keep. And I think Gregg talked about that a few weeks ago, of having $10,000 to $15,000 cushion. So it's not like we take 100% of the money and all put it toward principal. So we have that cushion, and then we're just hitting it that way. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's awesome, man.